All right, we are in our series on David. We're still just at the beginning. We're going to be talking about David all summer long, so I hope you'll keep coming back. Last week we concluded by seeing Samuel anointing David. Now David was younger then, not exactly sure how old he was, but he was younger, and we're not exactly sure how much time passed between when David was anointed by Samuel and when this event today where he goes and fights Goliath. Some scholars say it might have been just a couple of months. Others say no, it was more likely probably 1 to 2 years in between that time. Here's what we do know, is that the Spirit of the Lord left Saul and came to David. And the Spirit of the Lord was with David, but Saul, now we're told in 1 Samuel, that an evil spirit came and tormented Saul from time to time. And Saul, he was just, having a hard time. And so one of his people said, hey, I've heard about this young man, and he plays the harp, and he plays it beautifully. And perhaps if he played the harp for you, it would kind of soothe your spirit a little bit. And so Saul said, well, let's try. So they go get David and bring David into Saul's court. And we're told that from time to time, so again, we don't know how long over a period of time this is, but from time to time, when Saul was having a bad spirit or things were going wrong with him, he would call for David, and David would come, and he would play the harp, and it would soothe Saul. So Saul would David would go back and forth. He'd come and play for the king, and then he'd go back and tend his father's sheep, kind of go back and forth as was needed. But we're told in 1 Samuel 17, that the Philistines had gathered their forces for war. And the Israelites had assembled and camped on one side of a mountain, and the Philistines had camped on another. And there was a valley that ran between them. And this reminded me of growing up. I grew up in Houghton, Michigan, way up in the UP. And Houghton and Hancock were twin cities on two sides of these mountains. And I say mountain, we're in the Midwest, right? If you go out to Colorado, those aren't mountains, those are just hills. But for the Midwest, it's kind of a big hill or a mountain, and there's a canal that runs between. So anywhere I would go in Houghton, I could look across and see the town of Hancock, and it was the same for them. And that's kind of how it was with the Israelites and the Philistines. They were kind of facing each other, and we're told that every day a champion of the Philistines named Goliath would come out, and he would call out to the Israelites to taunt them. Now, Goliath, his height was 6 cubits and a span. Now, we don't measure too much in cubits and spans, but that's about 9 feet, 9 inches tall. So he really was tall. If you picture a basketball net, the rim is 10 feet. So he's 3 inches shy. He could slam dunk the ball he could be flat-footed, right, if he wanted to be. So he had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. So between the helmet and the armor, that's 125 pounds. So you get an idea of how big and how strong he was, that his armor alone was 125 pounds. So we can imagine how strong he must be to be able to wear that much weight and still move around and be able to fight. We're told his spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and his iron point weighed 600 shekels. That's 15 pounds. So this isn't a throwing javelin. This is a killing spear. And Goliath would have most likely stood second back in a shield wall with a really long spear where it would reach over the front people, which are making their shield wall, and be able to either stab. Usually they try to stab at the ankles of the people of the front shield wall facing them to try to make them falter, or they would get over their shields and try to stab them. So if you want to get an idea about how that is, 15 pounds, that's not very much, is it? But you take that, this week, find something at your house that's 15 pounds, and just hold it out like this for a couple of minutes. You'll be able to do it for a little bit, but 15 pounds actually starts to get pretty heavy. Now imagine 15 pounds at the end of like a 10-foot long rod. Now hold that out. So you get an idea about how strong Goliath really was. We're told that he would come out every day for 40 days, in the morning and in the evening, and taunt the Israelites. And he would say, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul?" In other words, "Oh, you guys are the mighty army of Israel. Come on out. We're just little Philistines, and who am I?" He's taunting them, of course. And he says, "Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Now, the armies at this point in time were probably fairly matched. If not, if one side had significantly more soldiers than the other, they would have just gone to battle and tried to wipe them out. But they didn't. They kind of faced off, taunted each other, hurled the insults. One day, Goliath said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." And on hearing the Philistines' words, verse 11 tells us that Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. And when I read that, I think yeah, I would be terrified too. If a 9-foot, 9-inch giant was trying to challenge me to a fight, I think that I would be terrified too. But what we see here is this. People put their hope in the things that they trust. When you trust in something and believe that it's going to be there for you, you're going to put your hope in that. And the people of Israel had decided that they were going to put their hope in the king, Saul, instead of in God. We saw that just 2 weeks ago or last week, that the people didn't want to have God as their leader anymore. They wanted to have a king to lead them like all the other countries. And so now they had Saul, and they had put their trust in him. But Saul was terrified. And so the people were also terrified too. So for 40 days, he came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Well, meanwhile, David's father David had several older brothers that were there in Saul's army. And so David's father Jesse said, "Hey, take this food." David's tending the sheep up kind of out in the wilderness. He said, "Leave the sheep for now. Come take this food and these supplies to your brothers. Take it to them." So David gets there and he leaves his flock and he goes up to where the battle is, and he comes in, and we're told that as he arrives and he's got his supplies, he hears Goliath shouting out and making his taunts. And so he leaves the stuff with the quartermaster, and he goes out and finds his brothers, and he listens to Goliath taunting them and yelling out his stuff. And David gets mad. So David says, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" While the Israelites saw a giant that terrified them, David saw things differently. He and his people, they were the armies of the living God. So this is true for us today. It depends on how we look at our problems. It depends on how we look at the giants that come forward in our life. And hopefully not a 9-foot, 9-inch tall giant. But the troubles, the problems that we come at in our life. When we put our trust and we put our hope in God, we will look at our problems differently than if we don't. If all we are is just trusting in ourselves or trusting in others, we're going to see those differently. But when we put our trust in Christ and when we put our trust in God, we will know that we can do all things through him who gives us strength. Well, David ends up asking the people around him, "Hey, what's going to be done for the man that kills Goliath? What will the king give? What kind of reward would the king give for a brave person that would be willing to go and fight him man to man and win?" And we're told that when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard David speaking to the men around him, that Eliab burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." In other words, yeah, you're saying that Dad sent some food for us and some supplies, but you have a job to do. You're supposed to be out watching the sheep. You just came because you want to watch the battle. You're not doing the job you're supposed to do. And David, this is so great. You can almost hear him whining. He says, "Now what have I done? Can't I even speak?" It's to Eliab, David was just his annoying younger brother, right? And we get kind of an idea and look in their families. You see the sibling rivalry, right? We've had that with our siblings. We see our kids with that with each other. The older brother's just annoyed by the younger brother. The older sister's annoyed by the younger sister. But the younger sister, she wants to be with the older sister, right? It's the same. That's the same as it was back then. Eliab, he didn't have any patience for Jacob. He said, I know how conceited you are. I was thinking about that, and honestly, maybe David was conceited. Maybe he was, because whether it was just a few months or a year or two before that, David had been anointed by Samuel in front of his brothers and in front of his family. And maybe that filled him with pride. Maybe he didn't hesitate to bring that up and mention that in front of them whenever they were all together. Maybe they were really annoyed with him. We don't know. We're not sure. But what we do know is that he turned away from his brothers and went and started talking to other people. And some of the men heard David saying, well, I could beat him, his vibrato, God's with us, forget those uncircumcised Philistines, I could go and fight them. And so one of those men went and told Saul, hey, we have someone that wants to go and fight him. So Saul, not knowing who it was, says, oh, okay, bring him to me, let's see. And David said to Saul, we read this a minute ago, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against the Philistine. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior since his youth. But David says to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. All right, maybe David is a little conceited, right? That said, we like to see these pictures of Goliath is huge, and they make David look like an 8-year-old boy. That's not the way it was. No 8-year-old boy is doing hand-to-hand fighting with a lion and a bear and prevailing, right? So David realistically was probably in his mid-teens, maybe 14, 15, maybe 16. He had filled out. He wasn't just a little kid anymore. At one point, one of Saul's attendants refers to him as a warrior. So, maybe he had heard that, he fought a bear and lived. Oh, what a warrior. Teenage kid somewhere in there. But a couple things I want us to not miss from this passage. Don't let others look down on you because you are young. Saul thought David was too young. But however old you are, 50 and 60-year-olds, don't let those 80-year-olds look down on you because you're young, right? All right. I got a bigger laugh at the first service where it's mostly, older people. But if God is calling you, whatever age you are, let God worry about your age. That's no one else's concern. And don't let other people define you, either who you are or what God can do through you or with you. It's not up to them. If God is calling you, let God equip you. Let God fill you with the Spirit. Let God worry about what your age is. And God, another thing we can see here, David talks about his past, about how, he's just out there doing his job. Out there by himself, tending the sheep. Here he is fighting a lion. Here he is fighting a bear. God can use the difficult circumstances in your life right now to help prepare you for something greater in the future. God prepares you in private before he promotes you in public. And this is true with David. We see this throughout the Bible. David recounts how he killed the lions and bear while tending the sheep. So, if you feel like God has called you and to do something for him, but right now you're just kind of in this waiting season, and boy, I thought God was really wanting to use me for this or that, but what's happening right now, it just seems like I'm just going along. Don't despise seasons of obscurity. God is using your private battles that you fight on a daily basis at work, at home, in other relationships, to prepare you for some other victories in the future. So, ask yourself, what lions and bears is God helping me overcome right now, that he may be able to use those in the future? Well, Saul, it's almost kind of comical. Saul tries to dress David in his tunic and his armor. And David, Saul, if you remember, he's head and shoulders above the rest. He was a tall man, not as tall as Goliath, but he was a big man. And so here's David. We can picture him with the helmet on and the armor, and it's just draping around him. And David says, no, I can't wear this. This doesn't fit me. He says, I cannot go in these because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. We're told, then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. So Saul tries to give David, hey, here's what I use when I go to battle. But David says, no, I'm not used to these. I have something else that I use. And that's true for you as well. When facing the giants in your lives or trials that seem like giants, use the weapons that you have that you're used to. The gifts and strengths and experiences God has given you and brought you through instead of trying to rely on someone else's. Well, so we're told that, by the way, this story is so epic, and it's going to be all summer long, but this especially this story, like the best movie Hollywood ever made doesn't match the reality of this, right? It's such an epic story. And here's Goliath with this shield bearer kind of standing off him, and here he is taunting, and all of a sudden they see a young man, come out and start to walk towards him. And at first they don't know what's going on. It's like, oh, I see someone's coming. And then Goliath sees him and realizes this is just a teenage kid. And he says, and he's got his staff. And he says, you come against me with a sword. No, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. He says, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And we're told that Goliath cursed David and said, come here and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. In other words, let the smack talk begin, right? Guys, we know this. David, he's not taking anything from Goliath. He is not afraid of him. He gives that smack talk right back. He says, hey, you come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, and you'll probably kill me. No, wait, that's what I would have said. He says, you come at me with a sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. So here's David just giving the smack talk right back. And we're told that all of a sudden David starts running at Goliath. David charges him. And if this was a movie, we could hear the suspenseful music start to build, right? The music in the background, the violin strings or cello strings, whatever it is, starts to build, and the music, and Goliath starts to come towards him, and David is literally running at him, and all of a sudden, David pulls a stone from his bag, puts it in his sling, and starts to swing it. And again, you can see this picture in their mind. They started out, 50 yards apart. Now the distance is closing, and Goliath is starting to get mad, and he's raising his sword up, and here comes David's sling, and all of a sudden David loses the stone, and we're told that the stone hits Goliath right square in the forehead and sinks in. And we all know what that means. And Goliath fell over. And David walked up to him and took Goliath's sword and cut off his head and held it up. And the crowd cheered and went wild. And the music went, da, right? All right, it's not a movie, but you know the Israelites cheered. And we're told that when that happened, the Philistines turned and fled, and the Israelites chased them down. Now, it's an epic story. It's great. I'm thankful I wasn't there. I don't want anybody trying to cut off my head, right? Here's just a couple points, and this is a story, we've all heard this many times, but number one, God uses unlikely people to accomplish unimaginable victories in His name. right? David was young. He was the youngest brother. He was just out in the wilderness. He had no idea that God would use him to become all of a sudden the greatest hero that Israel had ever seen. By human standards, he was not too impressive. He was still a teenager, and we're told he's a good-looking young man, but that good looks doesn't go too far against a 9-foot, 9-inch tall giant. But David's victory wasn't about his strength. It wasn't even really about his skill with the slingshot. It was about his trusting in the Lord. So, preparation when no one's watching. When you're going through life, be faithful in the little things, working through battles, trusting in the Lord, turning things over to Him. Have confidence in God's ability to work through you. And put your faith in God who fights for His people. So my question to you, I asked it earlier, what giants might you be facing right now? What little bears or lions or giants are you up against? I encourage you in those moments, in those trials, to put your faith in God, to pray, to ask God to give you the strength to overcome. Doesn't mean you'll be cutting off the giant's head, right? Not necessarily, but with God's strength, with God's peace, and with God's comfort through difficult times, we can overcome any Goliath we face. Please pray with me. Father, it's an epic story. It's fun to talk about and think about. Would not have been fun to be there. But God, each of us face trials every day as we go through life. Relationships in our families, struggles at work, co-workers, sickness. God, there's trials all around us. But you give us hope. And for that we thank you. We ask that you would fill each one of us with your Holy Spirit. Give us wisdom to navigate the problems that we face every day and to go through life. Give us the strength to trust in you. And give us the peace to know that you are with us every day. We thank you and we praise you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.